Welcome to the Ugly SNENS Requiem tips and tricks video. I will be showcasing the fight using the following loadout: El Huevo Blade, Ugly Bandana, and Basic Soul. I do not recommend using this loadout due to lack of survivability, however. If you want a good loadout suggestion for Ugly SNENS Requiem, try the following items that are being shown on screen. I will be showing the activation method and where Ugly SNENS Requiem is located before you fight him. First, enter the Ugly Cult hideout fight and go to the last room with the Elite Cultists. Then go to the left and enter a non-collidable wall. From there, you will need to climb the truss and click on the neon red truss at the top. This will activate Ugly SNENS and Ugly SNENS Requiem. Ugly SNENS can be found behind Ugly SNENS' Reawakening, but we're going to be focusing on Ugly SNENS Requiem, who can be found in the Ugly Realm behind the rock that's behind God himself. Ugly SNENS Requiem requires 100 love and 20 resets to battle, and rewards the player with 2 million base gold, 2 million base XP, and the Requiem Stone weapon when defeated. The songs used for Ugly SNENS Requiem are a Megalovania Electro Swing remix by the Musical Ghost during the first segment, and It's Finally Raining by Boiled during the second segment. Ugly SNENS Requiem has a total of 200 dodges, 100 HP, and 2 phases, each with 2 sub-phases. Each dodge lost grants Ugly SNENS Requiem a force field that lasts for around a second or two before being able to take damage again. We will now move on to explaining the fight itself. His arena is the same one used in his normal fight, however there are some platforms that will be useful in the second phase. He uses 5 attacks at the start, with the first being the Requiem Hell, which summons 3 yellow special hells at the player's clearing position. The second attack is an Ugly Blaster Circle, which surrounds it with 12 Ugly Blasters in a circle formation. The next attack is a Requiem Blaster Barrage, where he summons blasters in sets of 4, which fire beams in a triangular shape. The next 2 attacks are bone-based attacks, so let's go over the easier one first. Bone Splatter. A barrage of bones in sets of 12 spray out from Ugly SNENS' position in this order: white, blue, white. Bone Spiral. Ugly SNENS summons a set of 12 bones at the player's position and functions similarly to the Spade Spiral attack in Jebel's fight from Delta Room. With those attacks explained, here's my personal advice for each attack. My personal advice is to either jump or try to get out of it as fast as possible, since this attack can hurt sometimes. Usually, I jump since he follows it up with the Requiem Blasters right afterwards, but since in this video I'm using Ugly Bandana, I can just outrun it. This isn't exactly a threat unless you run into all the blasters somehow. Since they disappear on contact, you won't be taking any massive damage from it. Though, I still suggest you avoid getting hit by jumping over them. Sometimes this attack happens while you're mid-air, so I suggest moving to the sides to avoid being hit. If you're on the ground though, this attack isn't exactly a threat since none of the beams will be able to hit you. Except in certain situations. This isn't really that threatening, but can be a surprise when not paying much attention. Either jump or stay at a position where the bones can't reach you. One of the more threatening attacks in this arsenal. You can either walk out of it, jump away from it, or jump so that the bones can spawn in the air. I personally prefer to keep it on the ground in case of a miscalculation with one of his attacks in the second phase. Upon reaching 149 dodges, Ugly SNENS gains a new attack, which are the giant Ugly Blasters. These blasters appear above the player and can deal heavy damage if you don't get out of its blast on time. You won't be getting any advice on this because 99% of the time you'll just avoid this by just jumping and walking. This phase isn't really that much of an issue, unless you're no-hitting. I've rarely seen people die to this phase, so I should expect that you can make it to the next phase with ease. If you're wondering, his attack pattern is the Ugly Blaster Circle, then Requiem Hell, then Requiem Blasters, and then the Bone Splash and Bone Spiral. In the sub-phase, the Giant Blaster will show up during the Ugly Blaster Circle. With that out of the way, I'll just let you watch the gameplay until we enter the next phase. After reaching 99 dodges, the floor begins to disappear, requiring you to get on the platforms before you fall into the lava. There are a total of 9 platforms, with the middle row being longer than the others. We have now entered the second phase and the difficult part has begun. His attack pattern has changed, with 2 new attacks being included and 2 attacks being removed, which are the Giant Ugly Blasters and the Ugly Blaster Circle. Before I go into the new attack pattern, let me explain the new attacks. Terror Walls. Ugly SNENS unleashes a giant wall of pure terror, covering a third of the arena. You have 3 seconds to get out of it before the wall activates, dealing devastating damage to the player, leading to instant death unless you have invincibility. Fun fact, this attack actually deals 2000 damage, but has a lot of multi-hit and is capable of breaking force fields. This is actually how the Requiem Stone used to function, since it's pretty much the same attack before being adjusted in the classic update. Requiem Bones. After Terror Wall disappears, Ugly SNENS accompanies his bone spirals with these giant neon light yellow bones that show up in sets of either 2 or 3 bones. These also deal devastating damage, usually resulting in instant death. Prior to the classic update, these bones were actually the same color as the lava, thus making it more difficult to see. These two attacks, the Terror Wall and Requiem bones, are what people die to most of the time, either due to bad timing or the inability to escape the Terror Wall in time. Here is my personal advice for each attack. Sometimes you may already be inside a Terror Wall and die without even realizing it. My personal advice is to watch for the particles. If the particles are in your column, get out of there because the Terror Wall spawn right there. Alternatively, you can zoom out to get a clear view of the whole arena so you can see if you're in it or not. Just remember, you have 3 seconds to get out before it activates, so unless you have a slow reaction time, you better hurry. This attack is a tricky one, mainly because this has to do with timing, and there are 0 ways of knowing where the bones will come from. I usually wait around a second or 2 before jumping, so I can force the Requiem bones to spawn in the air, allowing me some room to pay attention to other attacks, like the bone spiral. Sometimes the bones will show up on the ground due to bad timing, or whatever. Either hope that you get good RNG and the bones will give you room to dodge, or just pray that you can jump over the bones to survive if you have no room. His attack pattern is the following: Bone Splatter, Requiem Blasters, Terror Wall, Requiem Bones, and then Bone Spiral. When Ugly SNENS reaches 49 dodges, the music intensifies and he gains a new attack alongside a change in his attack pattern. The X Terror Walls cover a portion of the map in an X shape, preventing players from going to any of the corner platforms and the middle one. My personal advice is to stay in the bottom, middle, or the top middle platforms so you can avoid having to run for a safe spot when this attack occurs, and also so you can access the side platforms when he does a normal Terror Wall. The Requiem bones also increase, ranging from 4 to 5 bones now instead of 2 to 3. Here's the new attack pattern: Bone Spiral into X Terror Walls, into Bone Splatter, into Requiem Blasters, and Requiem Bones into Terror Wall. This is the most difficult part of the fight, though I'm not entirely sure if my advice will be good enough for you. The Bone Spiral can be quite a challenge sometimes, but not as challenging as when the Requiem Bones appear. Requiem Bones appear alongside the Requiem Blasters, so I suggest jumping either during the Bone Splatter or the Requiem Blasters. Otherwise you'll end up in a bad situation where you have to dodge the bones while also making sure you're not in a Terror Wall. Speaking of the Terror Wall, you have to hope that it doesn't spawn in the middle column, because there's usually a run ender when that happens. You can make it out by assuming you have a safe enough room to. There's not really much I can say aside from this, so general advice for this phase is to time your jumps to avoid the Requiem Bones, keep an eye out for where the Terror Walls are, and make sure to stay in one spot so you can prepare for the X Terror Walls. Hopefully that was good enough advice, so enjoy the rest of the gameplay. Here's a quick summary of his reward. The Requiem Stone summons a Terror Wall which deals 69,001 damage, which hits multiple times every 0.175 seconds, and also has the ability to hit multiple enemies. This Terror Wall is also capable of breaking through force fields and shredding 5 dodges each time you land a hit. Before it can do damage though, it has a 1.5 second wind up time. Little quick fact, SNENS Rush was actually recently adjusted as of this video's release, so that's more suitable for the current Requiem Stone. Here's the changes. I'm going to clarify something before ending this video. If anyone's wondering as to why I own a true reset and casually just have negative infinity EXP, I'm a staff member for UUG and I've been one since March 27, 2022. Funnily enough, this is the exact same day as my old Ugly SNENS Requiem video. You may find me in the game usually just AFKing and doing random stuff like defeating bosses with wacky loadouts, or research for my upcoming game. You can also catch me saying hello to John whenever he joins me. He's been a friend of mine since like late 2020. With that being clarified, we've now reached the end of this video. This is actually my first time making a genuine video like this outside of school projects, so that's kind of funny. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.